5.2 Introduction. Counseling has been influenced by multiplicity of perspectives. Human potentials and problems can be considered from diverse pathways: psychodynamic, cognitive, behavioral, affective, interpersonal, existential and humanistic approach. In the previous unit you learned about psychodynamic approach to counseling and therapy. In this unit, we would all study one of the strongest pillars of counseling psychology, the third force in psychology, the existential-humanistic approach. In the next unit, you will learn about cognitive behavioral approach to counseling. These three approaches make up the backbone of counseling and therapy. Many ideas in counseling and psychotherapy have originated in philosophies. The existential-humanistic approach to counseling is an amalgamation of existential and humanistic schools of thought. The basic difference in this approach and others is the relative importance it gives to clients' subjective experiences and their personhood, rather than symptoms, and the focus on growth of clients rather than pathology. All problems are seen as originating from diminished ability of the client to make authentic, meaningful, and self-directed choices in life. Hence, the overall goal of therapy is to increase the individual's self-awareness, thereby empowering him/her to make healthy and appropriate choices. The major themes inherent in this approach is that of responsibility and freedom to make choices, owning the choices made and self-acceptance and a constant movement towards self-actualization and growth. The existential humanistic theories are also called as humanistic theories, whose main focus is on the individual as responsible for their own growth and development. This requires an increased awareness and understanding of oneself. Humanistic theories can include existential, person-centered and Gestalt theories. 5.3 Existential therapy. Existential therapy owes its genesis to the European philosophers Martin Heidegger, Soren Kierkegaard and Jean-Paul Sartre. Have you ever experienced any dreadful situation in which you feel that it's the end of your world? In this journey called life, one is sometimes thrown into such circumstances. Many people have gone through crisis, pain and suffering experiences quite unique to themselves. The challenges faced, if taken positively, provide a myriad of opportunities and can turn the tide in favor of the one who is struggling. All the three pioneers in existential therapy, Viktor Frankl, Rollo May and Irvin Yalom, had an extreme situation in their life which rendered them opportunity to test some perpetual questions that pervades human lives, questions pertaining to meaning in life, existence of God, death, self, etc. All of them in common were interested in issues of freedom, meaning of life, anxiety, search for values, responsibility, isolation and death. Existential therapy is not a very well-defined or structured approach to therapy. It is often not considered as a separate school as it doesn't offer any concrete model of therapy. It is considered more of a philosophical approach towards therapy, asking deeper existential questions on human suffering, meaninglessness and other themes mentioned above. The approach is often considered to just assist client in finding meanings through reflection and by recognizing various alternatives and by making them decide on their own. In fact, existential therapists like Van Dazen do not even consider the client as being sick, rather as someone who is sick of life or clumsy at living. This points to the very basic premise of existential therapy: human beings are free and can change by taking responsibility and making choices in their lives. Such freedom is implied when Mahatma Gandhi said, "You can chain me, you can torture me, you can even destroy this body, but you will never imprison my mind," in his fight against British rule in India. Similar is the view expressed by Viktor Frankl, believed to be one of the founding members of existential theory and therapy, who said that everything can be taken from humans, except one thing: that is the freedom of mind or the attitude one can have in any given situation. So the choice is always with the individual. View of human nature. With the motivation to help people suffering from existential crises like meaninglessness and alienation, the existential tradition seeks to strike a balance between recognizing the limits of human existence at one end of the spectrum to the limitless possibilities and potentials of human life on the other. It also juxtaposes the brighter side of life, courage, hope, meaning, with the darker side, anxiety, dread, death. The approach recognizes the inquisitive human nature that constantly questions about self and the world. It assumes that humans are motivated to make sense of their existence, and existential therapy facilitates this meaning-making process. It also recognizes the unfolding nature of self-processes and looks at individuals as a set of possibilities that manifests as per the choices they make. Some basic dimensions of human nature according to the existential approach are self-awareness. Humans have the distinct capacity for becoming self-aware. Awareness leads to freedom. Freedom implies choice, and choice comes with responsibility. Acknowledging the freedom to be as well as recognizing the contextual and social constraints and negotiating the two constitutes life. Choosing to expand one's awareness implies growth. Choice and responsibility. Humans have the responsibility of shaping their own destiny. They are the masters of their own selves and have the necessary freedom to choose among different life paths and take action. The ones who exercise their choice and take responsibility are authentic. Humans have the basic need to maintain their uniqueness and individuality as well as are motivated by relational and social needs. The paradox of creating one's distinct identity, of having the courage to be our true self and of establishing meaningful relationships with others describes life. There is an ongoing search for meaning, purpose, values and goals in our lives. When we experience meaninglessness or emptiness in our lives, we are motivated to create a new life with purpose. Humans experience anxiety in their efforts to become their authentic self. This anxiety, called existential anxiety, is inevitable. It results when we come face to face with death or loss, pain and suffering, meaninglessness and existential vacuum, isolation and uncertainty in life. Death is inevitable, and rather than avoiding it, awareness of its inevitability makes life significant and helps us appreciate the present. Acknowledging the impermanence of life can serve as a motivation, or act as a wake-up call to enjoy the beauty of the present moment. The main therapeutic goal of existential therapy is to help the client become self-aware and embrace their authentic self. This includes inviting clients to come to terms with their problems, supporting them to come up with the alternatives to reclaim and re-own their lives with authenticity. The specific goals include helping clients be fully present to themselves and in relationships, motivating them to take charge of their lives with responsibility, and to broaden their perspectives of looking at themselves and the world. The task is to assist clients in exploring their lives further, by learning lessons from the past and creating something valuable in the present. So, the goals of existential therapy are varied, with the crux being helping the client move towards greater acceptance of self and situation, becoming more aware, exercising choice and creating their own destiny. All this eventually helps in making life more meaningful. These goals make it quite evident that existential therapy is primarily an exploratory approach, where there is exploration of experiences pertaining to choice, identity, love, death and freedom. 5.3.1 Role of the counselor. Understanding the subjective world of the client is the primary role of an existential counselor. They do not adopt an objective, detached stance, rather focus on creating caring and intimate relationships with clients. The counselor ensures that the client realizes the importance of personal responsibility and accepts responsibility for their life and their choices. Blaming the other or the situation is not an option. Even when the client does blame others for their life conditions, the counselor motivates them to look into their contribution to the problem situation. The counselor invites clients to become self-aware, for only when a person is self-aware can he accept and live life responsibly. It's like the therapist holding up a mirror for the client to reflect and confront themselves. This helps them realize how they are living an inauthentic life and restricting their existence and makes them ready to change for their future. This therapeutic journey is considered to be a unique and creative process for each client. The counselor, in their own authentic way of relating to the client, creates space for exploration and experimentation, and encourages them to do the same in real-life situations too, outside of therapy. Client's experience in therapy. The client in existential therapy plays an active role in the process of reflection and exploration of self in the world. Clients experience diverse shades of emotions from fear to anger, joy, sadness to excitement. They become increasingly aware of how they are shackling themselves and hence might also taste some bits of existential freedom. Agency and responsibility is emphasized. Translating their realizations into action is a mark of effective therapy. Taking small steps towards a more fulfilling, happy and meaningful life with courage and hope, recognizing the freedom that they have, no matter however small, and extending the freedom through these small steps is emphasized by existential thinker Rollo May. 5.3.2 Techniques/strategies. Viktor Frankl, a leading existentialist, have come up with logotherapy, which emphasizes on finding meaning in life. He who has a why to live can bear with almost any how. Thus meaning making is important, which acts as a motivational force for human to live. It highlights the client's experiences and subjective world to find out meaning in one's existence here in this world. Frankl, J.D. Persuasion and Healing, a Comparative Study of Psychotherapy. Oxford, England, Johns Hopkins University Press. Existential therapy is not a technique-driven approach. It focuses on understanding the subjective experiences, the unique life world of each client. The focus is not on diagnosis or planning interventions, rather on describing, understanding and exploring the client's subjective reality like a fellow traveler or philosophical companion. Every therapeutic interaction is unique based on how creatively the therapist carves out a session, depending upon clients' problems and concerns, and therapist's own personality and style. Being responsive to clients' needs is the key. Like other humanistic existential approaches, the relationship between the client and the counselor is central to the change process. Client-counselor relationship. Existential therapists give central prominence to their relationship with the client. It is an authentic relationship, something that is referred to as an encounter between I and thou. In such relations there is true dialogue, with the interaction being direct and mutual between two individuals. It is a mutual journey of self-discovery for both the counselor and client. Therapy is viewed as the context during which the relational and existential problems of the client come to surface. Thus the focus is on the here and now interaction between client and counselor. Rather than specific techniques, it is the attitude of the therapist that counts. Therapist's honesty, integrity, courage and authentic ways of being influences the client also to be progressively authentic. If the therapist is non-genuine and non-transparent, the client too would remain guarded and defensive. The therapeutic relationship is marked by respect and faith in client's potential to change towards an authentic existence, genuine concern and empathy for clients' inner experiences, and presence of the therapist. Presence implies attunement of the therapist to the client's subjectivity, a sense of connection and companionship, and not just a focus on the content of the client's sharing. 5.3.3 Evaluation. Existential therapy can be easily integrated into most therapeutic traditions as an overarching framework. Creative integration of cognitive behavioral techniques with themes from existential approaches has already been done. It is argued that the emerging trend towards positive psychology is in line with that of the existential approach's affinity towards authenticity, subjective experiences, personal growth, agency, responsibility and meaning in life. Existential practice has been applied in a variety of settings and with a diverse population of clients, including those with substance abuse issues, ethnic and racial minorities, gay and lesbian clients, and psychiatric inpatients. It is effective for clients coping with developmental crises, experiencing grief, confronting death, or facing a turning point in life. However, existential approach to therapy has also often been criticized as it lacks systematic principles and techniques of psychotherapy. It remains one of the most widely influential, yet least officially embraced approaches. This could be due to the increasing preference for manualized and structured therapy or evidence-based practice. Concepts such as authenticity or being in the world are difficult to define and hence difficult to research. Another major drawback is the amount of maturity, experience and training required from the practitioners. The existential therapist needs to be wise, and must be capable of profound human understanding of life and its nature. Yet the most important aspect of existential therapy is its stance on placing a value on the darker side of human experience and to be able to explore, experience and make meaning out of it. Some also regard existential therapy as too individual-centric and as discounting social factors in shaping human concerns. The therapy would also be limited in the face of clients believing very strongly in the absence or lack of choice due to environmental or situational constraints. The pressures we face due to family or community, for example, the influence of BAPCH, complex social institutions in the North India regions related to various decisions in people's lives, cannot be negated. 5.4 Person-centered therapy. Developed by Carl Rogers in the 40s, person-centered therapy, PCT, was an extension of his thoughts on human beings, their potential and the best way to facilitate their growth. Today, this therapy is categorized as an affective approach, a group of approaches which have a subjective view of human nature and rely on the human ability of self-awareness as fuel to personal growth. Person-centered therapy uses a phenomenological approach, that is, focusing on the experiences of the person. How does the person experience herself and the world around? This direct personal experience or organismic experiences related to oneself are crucial for one's learning, enhancement and self-growth. View of human nature. PCT has its roots in the fundamental belief that each human being is rational and worthy. They also know inherently what is best for them. Furthermore, he believed that most people were inherently good, positive, constructive, forward-moving, and trustworthy. PCT also believes that people try to work towards becoming the best version of themselves, i.e. towards optimal functioning, as opposed to working towards reducing their inbuilt flaws, like defenses and cognitive distortions. The need for individuals to actualize is considered the fundamental human drive. Rogers believed that each individual not only had the potential to actualize, but also had an inner voice that guided them towards what was right or best for them, what he called an individual's organismic valuing process. Self-actualization is the key driving force of one's existence and influences the actions and behavior of human beings. The main focus is on the self and finding a meaning and purpose in life. Rogers' theory is also called self-theory. How an individual perceives his /herself, their experiences, and their interpretation of reality are important. If there is incongruence between the perceived reality and actual reality, it may result in maladjustment in the individual. Cause of psychological distress. According to PCT, the cause of distress in individuals is the separation between their real experiences, what they can actually do, how they actually feel, and their self-concept, what they think they can do and strive to become. The self-concept is influenced by society and its expectations from individuals. Thus there is a gap between the real self and the ideal self. Imagine you have joined paragliding training, but are not able to learn as quickly as others in your class. In one of the sessions, you heard your trainer say to other students, "Oh no, this student just isn't getting it. By this time in my training, I was able to stay in the air for at least 60 seconds. You would begin doubting yourself. Maybe you would make a personal goal for yourself and say, "I will try to stay in the air for 10 seconds at least, before I hit the ground." If you are unable to do so, you would feel bad about yourself. What has happened here is that society has put conditions on you. By this time I could stay in the air for 60 seconds. This forces you to put conditions on yourself. If this happens, only then I'll consider myself worthy. Instead of accepting yourself for where you were in your journey, you forced yourself to accomplish a goal based on social expectations. The more this gap between reality and expectations increases, the more are the chances of a person experiencing a complete psychological breakdown. Incongruence is a state when there is less overlap between real experiences, what they actually do and experience, and their self-concept, what they think they can do or feel. When an individual is in a society, she is fed notions of what she should be and how she should act, and she develops a conscious learned self, a notion of herself that she created based on social expectations. When such a person tries to succeed, she does that based on the same social expectations. My father said I would be a doctor when I grow up, so my self-concept says that I love biology, and now I will give the medical entrance and succeed. This person is now trying to achieve a goal of personal and professional growth, but it isn't her own goal, it is a goal that society forced upon her. This is called society-based actualization. What would happen if this person fails to clear the medical entrance? As society has created conditions of worth, you will be valued only if you fulfill certain criteria. This makes an individual start treating her own self in this manner, by setting conditions of self-worth and showing only conditional positive self-regard. When there is a big difference between one's experiences and one's self-concept, the person is said to experience incongruence. When a person who is experiencing incongruence is put in a threatening situation, where the gap between the real experience and self-concept is very evident, the person will experience anxiety, and become defensive. If these defenses are unable to subdue the anxiety, the incongruence will continue to increase, eventually leading to a psychological breakdown. That being said, one must have a motivation to do better and be a better version of themselves. This means there will always be some gap between one's real and ideal self. A lesser gap with more realistic expectations does not cause a psychological breakdown, but becomes a source of growth and actualization. The main aim or goal of person-centered therapy / counseling, also called client-centered therapy / counseling, as the name indicates, focuses on the development and actualization of the person. Following can be described as the various goals of person-centered therapy. Increase a person's openness to experience. PCT encourages clients to explore all aspects of their being. The therapeutic goal is to provide the client with a space where she can explore all different areas of her attitudes, beliefs and emotions. It therefore helps the client understand herself better. Decreasing the level of incongruence. The first goal of PCT is to decrease the level of incongruence. Clients seek therapy in distress. The first step to help the client move forward is to lessen this distress. Helping the clients to reflect upon the gap between their real and ideal selves and acknowledge that they are currently giving their own selves conditioned positive self-regard helps foster a journey that seeks to decrease this gap. Getting in touch with one's organismic valuing process. OVP Rogers described the OVP as a person's innate tendency to know what is best for them, and knowing what to change in order to have a more fulfilling life. Furthermore, he believed that once one can get in touch with this innate feeling, they will constantly have an internal voice that motivates them to move towards a more fulfilling life. Helping clients attain this awareness is another goal of PCT. Striving for actualization. PCT places focus on the growth and development of an individual. As opposed to psychodynamic and cognitive behavioral approaches, PCT and other humanistic approaches don't see removal of disorder as the goal of therapy. Instead, these approaches consider self-actualization the goal of therapy. Self-actualization is when a person completely realizes her potential and develops to the full of her abilities. This is a stage where an individual functions to the best of her capabilities. The goal of PCT is to help the client start working towards this end, to actively seek not just a distress-free state, but a full capacity state. Developing as a fully functioning person. Finally, PCT aims to help clients reach a phase where they have congruence, high organismic value, are aiming for actualization, and through all this are capable of experiencing completeness and joy. 5.4.1 Role of the counselor. In PCT, the role of a counselor is to be without a role. This is one reason why PCT is also known as non-directive counseling. The counselor's function in therapy is not one that can be learned or imitated, but one that has to be experienced, a role of empathetic listener who has faith in the client's own ability to lead her life. It is the beliefs and attitudes that the counselor has that shape his role as a therapist, and not a set of learned techniques. Yes, clients sometimes seek guidance, but a PCT counselor is neither an expert in the client's life nor a teacher, like in CBT. The counselor's role therefore is not like a mother bird who pushes a baby bird off a cliff to help it fly, but that of a steady nest, where the bird can continue to nurture itself before it flies away. When to make the flight, how to make the flight, the counselor puts these decisions to the client. As the therapist's attitude holds primacy, we must explore the kind of attitude that is suitable for PCT. The counselor shows care, respect, acceptance and understanding towards the client, while being genuine or authentic. She aims to facilitate and not direct a client. PCT is also open to a client's explorations. The client can shift the focus on therapy from the primary concern to other areas which have been denied in the past. The counselor must provide such an avenue whereby the client can feel free to explore any facet of her life. For a PCT therapist, the client's understanding of what is going on holds most importance. Even if the counselor uses psychological tests along the course of therapy, the final scores don't hold the importance, but what the client understands from the test and its results does. In this way, the expert in the therapy is the client. By saying this, PCT does not mean that the client is an expert in counseling or human psychology, but instead that the client is an expert in her own life. Client's experience in therapy. In PCT, the client's experience and the counselor's attitudes determine the degree of therapeutic change and success of therapy. When the therapist provides a suitable environment, it is hoped that the client would feel safe and respected and begin the process of self-exploration. The clients would begin looking at all aspects of their life and the full range of their experiences. As time progresses and the relationship between the counselor and client strengthens, the client experiences increasing freedom to expand the areas of exploration. This increase in a degree of engagement is also seen in the volume and quality of self-disclosure. Clients begin sharing emotions and thoughts that were not a part of their ideal self, like guilt, shame, jealousy, and had been ignored by the client's conscious awareness because of being inappropriate. Clients now come to accept and appreciate themselves in the course of therapy. The goal of therapy is to help clients reach a point where they can deal with conflicts, to come to grips with problems, and overbalance the regressive and self-destructive forces. 5.4.2 Techniques/strategies. As the outcomes of PCT rely solely upon the counselor-client relationship, Rogers gave 6 conditions which had to be met in order for a therapeutic intervention to work. He called these 6 the necessary and sufficient conditions for the success of therapy, i.e. not only did he say that these 6 were important to fulfill for therapy to be successful, but also that even if only these 6 conditions were met, no matter everything else, they are sufficient to bring about successful therapeutic change. Of these 6, 3 are requirements from the therapist side. 1. Therapist's congruence or genuineness. This condition requires the therapist to be honest and genuine with the client. This means that the counselor must be her real self during a session. The counselor's genuineness or authenticity helps her share her personal experiences, respond to the client with her real thoughts on the matter and not put on a facade. This is a condition that PCT therapists must strive towards. It must also be noted that therapists are also on their journey towards actualization and reducing the incongruence between their own real and ideal selves, so they aim to be as genuine as possible, not to be perfect, and constantly aim to be more genuine with the client. 2. Unconditional positive regard. As mentioned in the paragliding example above, attaching conditions of worth harms a person. In this light, a PCT therapist provides the client with unconditional positive regard. The therapist accepts the clients and their experiences as they are. This does not mean that the therapist approves everything that the client does. Nonetheless, the counselor accepts that this is how it is in this present moment. As a PCT counselor believes that each human being is capable of goodness, even if the counselor doesn't condone the client's present behavior, she would still consider the client as a whole, a valuable being. 3. Empathic understanding. The last condition for a counselor to fulfill is to provide the client with empathic understanding. This is experiencing the client's feelings as if they were your own, but without losing the as if quality. A PCT counselor must strive to see a client's feelings from the client's perspective, as if those feelings were the counselor's own, but not get carried away with those feelings. The other 3 conditions pertain to the client and counselor-client relationship. 1. Client incongruence. The client's incongruence, difference between real and ideal self, is what motivates a client to go on a journey of self-exploration. 2. Client-counselor relationship. The client and the counselor are in a psychological contract, an agreement that the client will be devoted to growth, while the counselor will offer unconditional acceptance to facilitate the client's journey. Within this relationship, the client feels safe and motivated to get better. 3. Client's perception. the client should be able to perceive the counselor's unconditional regard and empathy. Apart from these conditions, PCT does not rely on concrete techniques. However, Moon delineated some salient features of the way Rogers responded to some of his clients, observed from video and audio recordings of their sessions. Some pertinent points are shared below. 1. Non-expert language. It was seen that even if the client asked Rogers for suggestions or advice, Rogers refused to take the position of the expert and responded in a manner that was humble and conveyed to the clients that they were the experts of their lives. 2. Meta-statements. This was Rogers' way of introducing and making the client aware of his genuine thoughts in the moment, but also making the client aware that he was being genuine and sharing his real response. For example, instead of saying, "That sounds so disturbing," he would say, "I guess what I want to say is that this all sounds so disturbing." It should be noted that in both the statements, he was being genuine. However, in the latter statement he was able to convey to the client that he is being honest and true to his heart in front of the client. 3. Affiliative negative assessments. It was seen that Rogers responded to clients' negative statements using negative empathic responses. What is a negative empathic response? Let's suppose a client says the following: "I just can't keep living with this guilt, yet I can't get rid of this feeling. It seems impossible." Responding to such a statement by saying, "It sure is a tough task," would be a negative empathic response. Here, the counselor has said something negative if it is seen without context, but because the client was also framing sentences in a negative way, his, counselor's, empathic response would also mirror it. 4. Invitations for repair. Rogers also directly asked clients if his understanding of their statements, perceptions and inner world was accurate. 5.4.3 Evaluation. Person-centered therapy shifted the scope and culture of therapy drastically. As an approach, it empowered the clients as experts of their own life, demystified therapeutic techniques by moving away from technical jargons, and it was the first therapy that provided transparent records of completed cases. This helped draw many allied disciplines into the fold of psychotherapy, as professional counseling spread across schools, organizations and their management and parents. PCT is well suited for early phases of intervention, mild and moderate mental health problems. It can be employed in the group and individual settings, and across disorders, anxiety disorders, alcoholism, psychosomatic problems, interpersonal difficulties, depression, cancer, personality disorders, etc. PCT has made major contributions to the field of psychotherapy. It reconceptualized the client as an active part of the change-making process. It also popularized the use of the word client, someone who needs assistance, as opposed to the previously used word patient, someone who is sick. It took into account clients' inner experiences and their interpretation of them. It also focuses on long-term counselor training, one that evolves values, beliefs and attitudes, as opposed to a short-term technique-centered training. It is a flexible approach which takes clients' affective states into account, and because of client-centeredness, it can be adapted to various cultures. The therapy also has certain limitations. The focus on therapists being as opposed to fixed techniques leaves room for therapists' shortcomings becoming a major hurdle to therapy. This is because the entire efficacy of the therapy depends upon the therapist's unlearnable, inherent traits, and if those are absent, the therapy won't be effective. Furthermore, since this approach is non-directive, a lot of the onus of change lies with the client. If the client is shy or non-verbal, PCT would not be effective. PCT would work best with insightful and hard-working clients. PCT also discounts past experiences as significant influences in the person's present. While overemphasizing on past experiences is too deterministic, completely discounting them is counterproductive too. Lastly, the 6 conditions given by Rogers have been critiqued for being neither necessary nor sufficient. 5.5 Let us sum up. In this unit we studied the existential and humanistic approach to counseling. These are experimental and effective in nature. Clients' subjective experiences, their emotions, and relationships are emphasized during therapy. The client-counselor relationship is also central in these approaches. However, with respect to specific techniques and intervention methods, existential and person-centered approaches are primarily dependent on therapist's attitude and the relational space carved. Views of human nature, goals of counseling/therapy, role of counselor or therapist and the client-counselor relationship in both existential and humanistic approach are described.